What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports. If you're watching our college football channel, we continue with our 2023 predictions. The South Carolina Gamecocks are up next. Let's take a look at some of the other predictions for South Carolina. And this is a bit surprising. The FPI has them at 5.5 and 6.5. Athlon a little bit higher at 7 and 5, and the over/under is at 6.5. And that doesn't really match up to the vibe I've been getting, and maybe it's mostly just South Carolina fans. They feel like this team is potentially the second best team in the SEC East. They're going to go 8-4, 9-3, something like that. Again, these other predictions don't really line up with that. I have been looking at this roster, looking at this team, trying to figure out why people are so high on this team, because I think they have a lot of holes, a lot of question marks myself. I think this team is a bit overrated. I think if you're high on South Carolina, it's for one of a few different reasons. One, Shane Beamer, you just believe in him. You believe he's a great coach. You believe that he is going to get this team playing really well, and they're going to play better even than their roster would. You think that they would play, because if you look at the roster, I'm telling you, this team just does not match up with the top teams in the SEC. Maybe you see Spencer Rattler coming back, Juice Wells coming back, that combo, and you just look at that and think, and you look at the way they finished last year. They had the big one over Tennessee, things like that. Or you're just a South Carolina fan and you're going to say they're going to do really well no matter what. Those are reasons that I could see people being high on South Carolina. And I'm not saying that Shane Beamer's not going to get it done. Maybe Beamer ball works. Maybe special teams creates some big plays for them and wins some games for them. But when I look at the roster for this team, again, running back spot is a question mark. Offensive line, defensive line, not great. Defense, I mean, it's okay, but their roster just doesn't match the teams in the top of the SEC. So I think they're going to have a lot of tough games. The schedule is really tough. You get North Carolina and Clemson in the non-conference. You got to play Texas A&M out of the West, Mississippi State out of the West. It's a really difficult schedule. So I think that this team has a chance to be pretty good, but again, I just don't think they're ready to be a team at the top of the SEC. So I think North Carolina, this first game is going to be really tough. I've had a hard time with this pick. I think it's a pretty even matchup. I do think these teams are pretty even. I think North Carolina is going to be a little bit more explosive, especially in the run game. More weapons at wide receiver. I think their defense is going to be improved this year with some of their additions. And I'm going to go with North Carolina. I think Drake May's a better quarterback than Spencer Rattler. If the game comes down to which quarterback plays better, and Drake May is the guy, and I think that North Carolina wins this game. So I've got them beating Furman after that and getting to 1-1. Then they go on the road to face Georgia on September 16th. Again, I just look at the South Carolina team, and their roster is not even close to Georgia's. I mean, it's just not right now. And maybe Shane Beamer will get them there if they continue to build and recruit and everything. But playing on the road at Georgia, this game, I don't see it being close. I think Georgia rolls here, and I think South Carolina loses that game. Next up, Mississippi State on September the 23rd. Pretty even matchup here. I think these two teams definitely are similar. Both teams return starting quarterbacks. Of course, Mississippi State's going through some changes now that Mike Leach is gone and everything. So this is a tough one for me. This is one that I think could really go either way, but I think home field advantage probably the difference. Especially if they start 1-2, South Carolina going to be really desperate for a win to get on track here, and I think they win it. I think they beat Mississippi State. They get to 2-2. Then they play Tennessee on September 30th. This is a revenge game for Tennessee, of course. South Carolina ruined their playoff chances last year. Tennessee playing at home, revenge game. I think they're the better team. I think they're going to score a lot of points in this game, and I don't think it's going to be all that close. So I think South Carolina gets beat pretty bad here, and they drop to 2-3. Then they get Florida after a bye week on October 14th. Good spot for a bye week. I mean, that's a really good spot after a tough, those first 5 games, really, really tough. And so they get a bye week to kind of collect themselves, get back on track. They're playing at home, a Florida team that, I think South Carolina's probably a better team than Florida this year, especially, they have the advantage at quarterback for sure. And I think South Carolina takes care of business here at home. I think they beat Florida. They get the win, improve to 3-3. Then you get Missouri on the road after that on October 21st. Missouri is a team that I've been talking about as being really underrated. They're going to have a very good defense. I think that's something that people are not maybe realizing. They're going to be good on that side of the ball. And I think Brady Cook's underrated at quarterback. And this game's at Missouri. I expect kind of an ugly defensive battle here. And I just think playing at home, Missouri finds a way to get it done. So I'm going with Missouri there. Kentucky drops to 3-4. South Carolina drops to 3-4. Then they get Texas A&M on October 28th on the road. Again, just look at the talent of Texas A&M versus South Carolina. Big advantage for the Aggies. South Carolina will probably have a chance in this game. I think they'll play them tough, but on the road, really tough place to play. I think Texas A&M gets it done. I think they'll win at home, and then they'll bounce back, beat Jacksonville State, and get to 4-5. Then they get Vanderbilt on November 11th at home. The Commodores, another program that kind of seems like they're starting to head in the right direction, but they're just a long ways away from the top of the SEC, and I think they're still a good bit behind teams like South Carolina. So I think South Carolina playing at home will take care of business. Not a blowout, but a fairly comfortable win here for South Carolina, and that'll get them to 5-5. Then they play Kentucky on the 18th. This is a Kentucky team that I think is going to have a chance to be pretty good this year. They've always got a solid defense. I don't expect that to be any different. They've added some transfers. I was worried about the offensive line at one point, but they've added a couple of transfers in there. I think they're going to be just fine. Ray Davis, a transfer running back from Vanderbilt, really, really good player. And then you get Devin Leary with some weapons. I mean, this is probably the best group of wide receivers Kentucky has had in a long, long time, maybe ever. A really underrated group. And so I think that Kentucky offense is going to be able to score. I think they're going to have a better defense in South Carolina. And even at South Carolina, I still think Kentucky pulls through in this game. I'm going to go with the Wildcats. I just think they're the better team. Probably an unpopular pick. I think most people probably are going to say, well, South Carolina's at home, they'll win that game. And maybe they do, but you could easily flip some of these other games around. You could say, I think they beat Kentucky, but they lose to Florida or lose to Mississippi State. However it falls. But I think they lose to Kentucky. But then against Clemson, a rivalry game, they've got the belief. They did it last year, and I just don't think this Clemson team is where they used to be. They're not an elite program. They're a really good program, but I don't think they're at that elite level anymore. And I think South Carolina playing at home, desperate, needing this win. They come up with some of those big plays. Beamer ball pays off. They make some, maybe return a kick or block a kick, something like that. It's a crazy game, rivalry game that comes down to the fourth quarter, really close. But I think South Carolina ruins Clemson's season. I think they upset the Tigers. They get the win here, get themselves to a bowl game, and maybe this win and then another recruiting class can kind of propel South Carolina to start climbing up in the SEC. I just don't think they're there yet. I think last year they really overperformed, and again, give Shane Beamer credit for that, but I just don't think they're quite there yet roster-wise, and maybe I'm totally wrong. We'll see. I'm just going with my gut feeling here. And again, some of those other numbers back that up. The over-under only 6.5. FBI putting them under 6-6. So I'm not alone here, but I feel like I'm alone because I feel like anytime I've talked about South Carolina, I just get, no, this team's going to be really good. They're going to be a top 25 team, all this. I just don't see it. We'll see what happens on the field. Pretty tough schedule. I think, they could beat North Carolina. Let's just talk best case scenario for a second. They could beat North Carolina. They could beat Missouri. And they could beat Kentucky. So 9-3 is not out of the question. But then you got Clemson they could easily lose. So I think 8-4 is a realistic. If I'm a South Carolina fan, I want to get to 8-4. That's a really good season. And 6-6 is okay. 7-5 is pretty good. But there's potential for this team to go 5-7. They could lose all these games and then also lose to Clemson. So I think 6-6 is not a terrible season, and that's where I think they're going to finish right there, getting to a bowl game in 2023. Give me your thoughts, your predictions on the Gamecocks down in the comments below.